Hey, what's going on, everybody? My name is Corey, better known as the Seaman. And I want to welcome you to another edition of the Seaman's Cinema Sit Down. So, over the weekend, I went to the movies, check out a comic book movie, kind of fill in my time, get my comic book movie fixed before Endgame arrives in just a week. Oh my god, I can't believe we're just a week away from it. I'm so excited. But I was excited for this movie as well, man. I've always been a fan of this property. Guillermo del Toro originally helmed it and created just this wonderful world that starred Ron Pearlman that I really was a big fan of. And we never got the third movie there. And a lot of people, including a lot of people working in that movie, like Pearlman and del Toro, all disappointed that they didn't get a third one. Kind of felt like we might never go back. And then they cast David Harbour to reboot this. And I was like, that's an interesting choice. Like the pudgy cop from Stranger Things. I want to see where this is going. And then images came out. And then trailers came out, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is gonna be amazing. And then the reviews came out. And this movie, it's got a lot of problems. But are those problems soul-crushing? Well, why don't you pull up a chair, man, take a seat. We're getting ready to dive in spoiler-free into Hellboy 2019. That's right, man. Like I said, I'm a fan of this property, and everything that was coming out before the movie looked great. It had wonderful receptions at Comic-Con, and like I said, the more and more we saw it, it really looked like it was going to lean into the comic books quite heavily. And I get excited when there's comic book stuff that's like super accurate. The problem with this movie is that I think it takes on a little too much. This thing is massive. It is an epic, to say the least. But it feels like a movie that was like, if we're going to make one Hellboy movie for the rest of eternity, let's jam everything we can in there, man. And it's crazy because there is a storyline start to finish that kind of features the Blood Queen Nemu. We kind of see her origins, how she comes back to the world, and then how she tries to bring about the end of the world through Hellboy, to kind of, complete certain prophecies that are kind of foretold in the story. And if you could have maybe just kept to that, maybe this thing would have worked. The comic accurate stuff that they pull out is really, really solid, and we'll get there. Problem is they don't just lean into that. They're leaning heavily into the book, The Wild Hunt. And unlike Guillermo del Toro, who used Mike Mignola, the writer of the comics, in a smaller role, like he just would make sure, like, hey, does this work? Does this feel right? Things like that. And got certain comic accurate moments in the movie that worked, but adapted that stuff into a good movie. Here, it feels like the people that are working on the movie are too close to the material. Mike Mignola was used heavily by Andrew Crosby and director Neil Marshall as far as how much they consulted and how much they got from him to kind of adapt stuff. There's just too much of it, man. The movie throws so many characters at you, so many, monsters at you, which is stuff I'm cool with, but there's so much being packed in here, and they're just trying to build out this massive Hellboy world that the story gets muddled, and you kind of walk out of the movie going, that felt like a whirlwind, man. Like, so much was thrown at me. I kind of got to let this one sink in a little bit, and that can throw you off in a negative way, and it kind of does here. And when you bite off a little bit more than you can chew, the storyline gets muddled. The pacing gets thrown off. You see things where you're like, why couldn't we learn more here? The character arcs aren't really strong. The humor in the movie, something that Hellboy's really known for, doesn't have any time to breathe. So before you can laugh or enjoy a joke or a humorous bit, you're getting something else thrown at you. And that just didn't work for the movie. Throw in, too, that the CGI isn't spectacular in this movie. It's pretty solid, and it has some nice moments where it does kind of work well with the practical effects. But other times it stands out and you're just like, that wasn't that great. Oh man. But you also are able to have some really fun CGI moments as well. So it's an interesting mix. Like I said, everything that's bad has something that's like also a little bit good. And it goes back and forth like that the whole movie, because I don't think this movie knew what it wanted to be until the very, very end. And we'll get to that in a second. But the other big thing that I think is going to be a key contributing factor to why people won't like this movie, the gore and violence. This is a comic book rated R movie that leans into the rated R-ness in a way that I think everyone was scared with Logan and Deadpool. And when those movies leaned into the blood and gore, but did it in a way that just felt natural, didn't feel over the top, didn't feel like that was their focus, you get these really spectacular movies, and this movie feels like its focus was trying to be bloody and gory, and there is so much. There's like a 2-minute stretch toward the end of this movie where I was like, oh my god, like, they pushed me to my edge. And my line is pretty far out there when it comes to blood and gore. I'm a big horror fan, and I love that stuff. And even the horror elements in this movie don't quite connect because it's just too overstuffed. So that's kind of my general feel of the movie, but there are some positive things and some things that are just okay. And one of those okay things, unfortunately, is Milla Jovovich. I'm a big fan of her. I was really intrigued to see her play Nimue, the Blood Queen, and see where that story went and how she would work with that, stuff. And it ends up being a fairly generic Milla Jovovich performance, which is upsetting because I'm a big fan of hers. And I think they adapt some of the Blood Queen stuff really, really well. Like I said, her origin, how she ties in with King Arthur in that world. They adapted all that stuff well, but there's so much going on that Jovovich doesn't even get a chance to really shine. So she's okay, but there are some really solid things in this movie. The comic accurate stuff is awesome. They're pulling from The Wild Hunt mostly, but they're also pulling from Darkness Calls and another book called Hellboy in Mexico. And our opening sequence starts, with his origin, and then we jump into the Hellboy in Mexico stuff. And that's super comic accurate. There are images that are right out of the panels of the comic. I thought that was really cool. Like I said, Nimue's origin stuff and what they pull from Darkness Calls, really, really solid. I loved how they fleshed out Hellboy's story and built his world. And there are moments throughout the film where you're just like, oh my gosh, man, that's right off the page. And that stuff's really cool. It's unfortunate that it gets trapped by this muddled, too big of a story. And then, like I said, you have okay CGI, but you have really, really solid practical effects. Much like Guillermo del Toro, the practical effects in this movie are spectacular. Hellboy's look is beyond phenomenal. It's the one thing I might, hands down, that part is better than what del Toro did. I just thought he looked and felt and was just adapted in a way where I was like, that's really cool. And there's several characters that use practical effects. Baba Yaga, the look is terrifying, first off. But how they utilize her and all the comic accurate stuff with her character and her house in particular, things you'd never think you would see. And they stick to this stuff in a way where oh man, they even got the eye stuff in the movie. That's cool. And her practical effects and her makeup, stellar. As is this Gruagach character. He's kind of like a boar man. He's essentially a shapeshifter who gets kind of trapped as a shapeshifter. And that stuff, again, really comic accurate stuff. Deep cuts with Gruagach. And he's in the movie actually a lot, and he looks phenomenal. And he's actually the best combination of practical effects and CGI. Because it works. And every time he's on screen, he's one of the few people who they actually let a joke land where you can go, it's just because of the delivery that he brings. But I really liked how they used him. And it's man, if we could have just maybe focused on Nimue and him and Hellboy, that stuff could have been cool. So the practical effects were really, really solid. And then there's really solid action, and you will have fun in moments of this movie. Like I said, it's unfortunate that it gets bogged down by the amount they try to cram in there, because there are some wonderful moments. Like I said, Baba Yaga's house, that sequence is crazy good. And you're just sitting there and you're like, I can't believe they're doing this. The Wild Hunt involves Hellboy taking on some giants, and they capture that stuff really, really well. The comic things in there are amazing, and that scene is, you sit back and you're like, wow, that was dope. And the very, very last scene in the movie, it's so unfortunate. Like I said, this movie doesn't know what it wants to be, I think, most of the time, because it's trying to be too many things. And then there's you get to the end of the film, and then there's a 6 months later tag. From that point on, I thought this movie was perfect, and I was like, if we could have done that, this thing would have hit massive. The final sequence that you see Hellboy in is so much fun. The humor hits. It has time to breathe so you can laugh. The action is stupendous. The interactions between our main characters is really, really great. They feel like a team, and you're like, where was that the whole movie? And then the 2 post-credits, really, really solid, man. Again, deep cut kind of comic things that they're leaning towards. You're like, I wish we could get to the sequel to see that. It's unfortunate. I'll say it again and again and again. This movie didn't work because there are elements of it that are spectacular. And there are things that are spectacular in this movie that are driven by wonderful performances. Ian McShane as Professor Broom I really enjoyed him. He always does a great job, and his over dramaticness really fits into this movie and the types of things that they're leaning into and going into about Hellboy's origin and some of the things. So I just thought he delivered a really solid performance. Love Daniel Day Kim. It was cool to see them adapt Damio, and how they play with him allows him one of the most spectacular portions of this movie, and where the CGI really worked. Something with his character where I was just like, oh man, that was awesome. So I really like Daniel Day Kim's performance. Sasha Lane, though, steals the show a lot in this movie. She is absolutely wonderful portraying Alice. I love how they get into her power set and how she starts to learn more things about herself. And her performance is wonderful. When she's on screen, she just makes you smile. You just get sucked into whatever she's doing. You're like, I like what's going on here. Give me more of this. And her relationship with Harbour, their chemistry is really good on screen. So the Alice and Hellboy stuff, I thought really, really worked. And then, of course, Mr. David Harbour is far and away the best thing in this movie. He is Hellboy. He totally gets it. He feels like Hellboy. Like I said, he looks like Hellboy. His practical makeup and stuff. And when he gets the horns, oh my gosh. Like I said, his action is great, and Harbour pulls all that stuff off. He nails the humor, even though the movie doesn't allow the humor to work. He totally understands it. He gets who Hellboy is. He feels and looks like him in a way where you're like, God, man, it's so unfortunate that we're probably never going to get a second Hellboy with this group. There are all my non-spoiler thoughts on Hellboy 2019. Now I want to know what you're thinking, man. Are you a fan of the Hellboy series? Are you someone who was really, really upset Guillermo del Toro didn't get his third movie? Did you want nothing to do with this movie? But if you did see it, what worked, what didn't? Was it bad? Was it good? I'm interested because as bad as the critical reviews have been, I can see some fans being really behind this because it has very, very comic accurate feels and imagery, and you have a really strong cast and some wonderful action and moments. It's just more of a popcorn flick, in the bar for superhero movies a lot higher. So let me know where it falls there. If you haven't seen the movie, has the Seaman enticed you? I don't know. I don't think this is one you have to go see at the theater. I think this would be probably a good one to catch when it comes out on DVD. Hit it on Redbox or pick up a DVD, rent it on VOD. I think if you're a Hellboy fan, you should definitely check it out because of the comic accurate stuff in the movie. There's a lot of deep cut stuff where fans will be like, wow, I can't believe I got to see that on the big screen. But overall, I don't know. So if I've enticed you, let me know. As always, if you've enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. And if you're new here and you want to come along in all of my Seaman adventures, why don't you go hit that subscribe button, man, and then the little bell that follows so you get alerts every time I make a new video. The Seaman's Cinema Sit Down. I'm the Seaman, and I'm signing off. Peace all. Well. If you aren't still here, looking for something else to check out that's Seaman related, why don't you check out a video like this guy or this guy? And if you really want to help the Seaman out in year 2, hit that subscribe button and come join the Cinema Sit Down Squad, kids. You know what to do. See ya.